From United Presbyterian Church and part of HRP Green, and I'm going to be handling this microphone while you're asking questions. So I'm going to come around. If you would like to speak, if you have comments you'd like to make, or if you have questions that you would like to lift up, I encourage you to maybe jot those down so that they can be concise and clean, so that our panel has half a chance of answering them, right? And if you have a story, keep it tight. Remember that we're recording and that we want to hear what you have to say, and if you say too many words, we'll miss it. Any questions for the panel?
Hi, my name is Connie Knapp from Yorktown. My first question is, how do you know if your church buildings are situated well enough to be able to use solar? How do we start to find that out? Thank you.
First, you have to know where south is.
I know that.
Okay, so you're about half done.
Oh, great.
It's not that difficult. If you can get about 30 degrees above the horizon clear, and you have a reasonable amount of swing back and forth from southeast to southwest, you'll be fine. Particularly if you're going to a flat roof, then it's not nearly as critical, but you're getting less total watts out of a panel. In other words, the best thing is to have the panel always facing directly to the sun, but that's not possible when you put it on a roof. You can get mounts that help with that, but that's getting very technical.
Thank you.
Yeah, we went just with commercial provider, and they do all of that. And as she mentioned, when you do a lease or a power purchase agreement, they give you a guaranteed amount that your panels will produce. So they're the ones who are calculating that and determining it. So like on ours, they originally were just putting it across the south-facing roof, and then they decided to get us to the level of power production that they had promised us. They couldn't do it with just those panels. So they added them on a west-facing roof that's on our the building's sort of in L shape. So they put additional panels on the west-facing roof and got us to the level they had promised. So they do all that. Like so I said, I'm not an expert on anything.
Thank you.
I was wondering how many panels do you have on the roof?
What are you guessing? 90?
Just the right amount.
Just the right amount.
I'm Ann Wood from Jeffersonville Presbyterian Church out in Sullivan County, and I have two questions. The easy one first is, you said that the energy production is reduced as the panels age. How long does it take for the panel to remain effective?
Yeah, that's he can answer the technical, I'll answer the legal.
There is a reduction in any device. It's approximately 2 to 3% a year tops. Normally they look at 25 years as being a useful life, quote unquote. Nobody really knows actually, but it's guaranteed, warranted for that.
Okay.
And that, again, in the lease, that is what they calculate. They calculate an annual production. It starts at a set amount and it reduces each year. I think by the end of the 20-year lease, it's about a 10% reduction over the original production that they anticipated. Of course, I don't know if you get clouds every day, what they do, but that's not my problem either.
Well, Liberty did have snow this morning. So my second question is, roofs nowadays come with a 30-year guarantee generally. Has there any, and solar panels haven't been around quite that long. Has there been any age progression study done to determine what the effect on the roof is of ice damming and that sort of thing around or underneath the panels?
There's been a lot of study on that, and just to sum it up, the panels are not laid directly on the roof. They're usually 3 inches to perhaps 6 inches above the roof on rails, their own rails. So the wear on the roof is attachment of those rails on the roof for leakage, that sort of thing. But the systems they have today are just excellent. If they get the roofs down right initially, I don't think intrusion of water is going to be a problem. There may be some, but nobody's reported a big problem in that regard that I'm aware of. Now, the kind of roof is another thing. If you get a regular shingle roof, that's the cheapest way to go. But, it's going to wear out, and if you do have to replace that and remove the panels to do it, that's a big operation. I talked to a company in Norwalk just the last couple of days. They recommend standing seam roofs, metal standing seam roofs, for a couple of reasons. One, they're good for, well, as long as necessary. There's no wear. The seam itself becomes the attachment point for the panels. So it greatly simplifies how the panels are mounted on the roof. So those are two examples, but like everybody else here, you've got to go to the experts for that. The companies that sell the actual mounting hardware are very good sources of getting that kind of information.
My name is Frank Ketchum. I'm from Otisville, Mount Hope. What is the total percentage of power that the nonprofits are allowed to generate? Like residential is, I believe, almost 100%, right? And I think regular businesses can only generate 70% or something like that. Is it limited or anything?
I think it depends on under what tariff you're currently receiving service from your utility provider. So we were a residential service, so we were covered by the residential rules, essentially. Again, what they shot for was about 100% of ours, is what they were shooting for. So.
Yeah, I believe that NYSERDA will provide the incentive up to 110% of power production, but there's no advantage to getting over 100% because you're paying to have the panels put up and you don't benefit from that additional 10% that you're producing above what you're using.
So you touched on a comment, a question I was going to ask. I don't know, Gary or Nina, if you all have the answer to it, but can you speak about net metering? Sure.
So net metering is a law that we have in New York State, which is one of the key factors that makes solar work so well now in New York State. And the way it works is when solar panels are installed, they switch out your current electric meter and put in a bi-directional meter. So your meter can run forwards and backwards. And so, for instance, if it's a sunny summer day and no one is using power at your church, but the panels are producing a lot of power, your meter will run backwards. And then if the sun goes down, people come in for an event, the lights are turned on, the meter will start running forward, as it typically would. And so during the summer, if for instance you have a system installed that's designed to produce about 100% of what you use, it means during the summer months, which are obviously much more sunny than the winter months, you're going to have credits on your account because you've been producing more than you've been using. And then during the winter months, when you're not producing as much, you're going to use up those credits through the power that you use. And so essentially it lets the electric grid, which your system is connected to, serve as a big battery. As much energy as you can produce that you're putting out in the grid, you're getting credit for that.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. I would just add, if you lease from a company like Solar City, they're probably going to put a lot more capacity on your roof than the 100%. And if you look at some of the small homes down here with 30, 40 panels, it makes you wonder what they're doing in the cellar. But actually, most of the power, Solar City has a different kind of tariff than a residential tariff, which our church has. I have on my solar. And you got to net out every year your credits against your usage at the end of the year, or they just wipe them clean. So there's no incentive to put too many panels on the roof. But Solar City has a big incentive because they have what's called a feed-in tariff. They are like the power plant. They're the same as somebody starting up a generator someplace and being a purveyor to the electric grid. So that's one big difference. And I think it's a good way to save money, and I'm sure there are many happy customers, but I frankly am not a fan of having your roof leased out. I didn't do it in my own case, and we don't recommend doing it on our church. But I'm sure it has its value and advantages.
Thanks for your comment.
I just want to make a quick comment about something that Rich just said. Just to put add some context here, a lot of things that we say when we bring up NYSERDA is rapidly changing right now. There's this huge panel that the governor's convened, what's called Revitalizing the Energy Vision of the REV process. And basically there are several proceedings underway that are changing it so quickly that if we had this same panel just in a few months, it'd be a completely different set of incentives we may be talking about with NYSERDA. So even things like being netted out to everyone being brought to zero at the end of the year, those topics are currently in discussion as far as whether that will continue. I was just informed a few days ago that that money I mentioned to you about the 50 grand that's available, that will cease to be provided after Q1 2016. Same thing for the energy assessments. They're going to stop providing those. It's a program that's been around for several years. So a lot of programs are being, taken away. They're being ended with the idea of something new coming, and we don't know what that new thing is. So I just wanted to caution everyone, whenever you hear NYSERDA, just think in the back of your mind that it is a very, very quickly moving and transforming machine. We just watched an existing pre-qualified incentives package go away with very little notice from the state. So this is where if you already have things where I know that if I get this item, this is the incentive that's set up, that just, we were notified right before, 1 week before it was to end, that it was ending. So things are really just evolving very, very rapidly here. Just want to say that. Yeah.
Thanks. My understanding in terms of Solar City and the companies that offer leasing and the power purchase agreements is they're still operating in the net meter paradigm. So we have no feed-in tariff in New York State. Everything is net metered. So the companies like Solar City, they're going to push to get you at 100% of producing 100% of all the electricity that you use, but they won't try and take you above that because they're not actually able to do anything with that excess electricity. They're not able there's no financial benefit to anybody for the electricity above that 100%.
And I would just add, if you're leasing it, you get all the excess production anyway. They don't get any. So we have a guarantee of 22,000 kilowatt hours per year, but if we produce 23,000 kilowatt hours, we get the extra 1,000 kilowatt hours. It just runs through our tariff, whatever the Orange and Rockland tariff provides, which, again, support net metering, because Orange and Rockland will try to kill it.
First, I have a comment and then a question. And the comment is, as I understand it, when you're producing more electricity than you're using in the summer, that you're actually helping the base load issue and the peak load issue, and therefore helping with the carbon footprint, because your electricity is not a carbon footprint production. But ordinarily, the excess capacity for all those air conditioners you're running is, and you're kind of countering that. So there's a green value beyond your own for that. My question is back over here to the issue of Moore's Law in panels and switching, because I didn't quite understand that, and maybe I never will. But if you're saying that the panel has essentially a life like a slate roof, but the switching changes. Is that going to extend the life of a panel that's been installed, or is it only going to be effective on new panels that are manufactured with the new switching?
Once this panel goes on the roof, it's never going to change for 25 years. What I was referring to is that the cost of that panel 3 years from now, it's now 70 cents. It was $1.40 3 years ago. 70 cents a watt on that panel. It's now, it was $1.40 3 years ago approximately. It may be 35 cents in another 3 years. So you can put many more panels on for the same cost of the panels. So it's the driving technology itself. And that's really the engine. The switchgear and the like, you can get some economies on there much better than they used to be. But it's on the square footage of panel and how much electricity it'll produce per square foot. That is the driving engine. So what we're seeing is a technological revolution that will allow us to go to more marginal situations of generation and make them profitable such that they can be switched to solar. Your point about the carbon footprint and the displacement of carbon is a major point of this whole thing. We're in a situation where we don't do some of these things. Scientists are saying we'll have dire consequences. Now, I hasten to say scientists because there is a great debate among the non-scientific community. I guess that's a parenthetical comment. I'm just talking about the technology in general is improving at a very, very rapid rate.
I want to build on some of these comments of 100% and so on and see if I understand correctly in the context of my question. I signed an agreement that says I'm getting solar power even though I live in a condominium association and it's being fed through Orange and Rockland. Churches are made up of people. Is there something in this conversation that allows this to extend beyond the church building to the congregation in a way that they can engage in that production of power to extend its base? And is there a political path here that's opening in terms of moving beyond these other barriers?
Sounds like you.
It's a great question, and the answer is yes, in a number of different ways. So the Solarize programs that currently exist, both in Westchester and in Hudson Valley, they are both for residential and commercial properties. Churches would fall under the commercial category. So those existing campaigns would allow parishioners and the church buildings to participate. If there was an interest in creating your own Solarize program, it could be focused on the church and then extended to all the congregants, and so that could work equally well. Although, as someone had commented earlier, some of the solar installers only do residential, some only do commercial. So you might either need two different installers, or else perhaps more easily to select one that could work with both categories of customers. There's also another development called shared solar that has just been enabled in New York State. Also through the Community Solar Program at NYSERDA. And that enables larger solar installations to be put in place, for instance, on a church, or if a church property had a lot of extra land and you were interested in doing a big ground mount system, for instance, through shared solar, it's possible for, in that case, for instance, parishioners to purchase part of that installation and to have their percentage of the energy production from that installation be credited directly on their utility bill. So rather than just purchasing green energy, as many of us have from an ESCO or whatever the case may be, it's now possible for projects to be developed where somebody actually owns a percentage of the production from a particular installation in a particular place. And that's a brand new development in New York.
You said use two terms, shared solar and community solar. Would you clarify? I just asked you for clarification of the difference between shared and community solar.
So in New York State, in NYSERDA, which is the energy agency for New York State, they created a program called Community Solar. And under the auspices of the Community Solar Program are all these new kinds of efforts like Solarize and shared solar that make it easier for people to work together to get more solar installed. So the shared solar or shared renewables is a new program that in New York State exists under the Community Solar Program.
Just to add, this is just underscoring what I was saying before about how things are changing right now. They're literally building the airplane while flying, so to speak, with all these evolutions. I used to call it remote net metering, but it's as far as shared solar that Nina just described. And just was really, really quick, just to give everybody the 30,000 foot, like what's going on right now. We're trying to find a way to not need to build more billion-dollar power plants and not use such dirty forms of energy, and to do it in the most efficient way possible. So it's this ongoing conversation where as new developments come from it, you're seeing it on the ground right now to the point where I believe NYSERDA won't even be called NYSERDA, it should be called the Clean Energy Fund. So even the name NYSERDA is going to change. So just, I would caution everyone here to just stay mindful of all these developments as we keep working to go green.
Yep.
I feel like I'm a Duchess. We're a little bit of the Wild West. We are looking into trying to get our members at church, if they donate a panel, we're trying to get them solar panels at the same cost the church is getting, which is basic at cost, and getting an installer, sort of create a discount program for individual church members that participate. We've really not associated with any of the programs that we're talking about, and they sound really helpful. I'm not sure they're as existing up in Dutchess to the same extent as they are in Westchester. So we're looking at some ways to get our congregations and our communities in a deeper level as well as participating within the congregation.
I'll just make one additional point related to how quickly things are changing and the implications of that. The federal tax credit, which is worth 30% of the cost of a solar installation, is scheduled to expire at the end of next year. The incentives available now from NYSERDA are on a declining scale, so the more solar that's installed, the lower the incentive is falling. And so it's the feeling of a lot of people working in the solar field that this is essentially the best time that you're going to see to go solar, because even though the costs of solar panels and installations have been falling over time, these very significant incentives, which account for a very significant percentage of the cost of solar, are in the process of expiring. And so it's a great time for all of you to be looking into going solar now, because there are questions about after next year exactly what's going to be available and what's going to make sense.
I just wanted to reinforce a couple of points here. One thing that Kathy just brought up, you should recognize the churches cannot take the 30% credit. We investigated it, and it goes away. It has to be on your house. Any of you out there that were part of an affinity group, that you were buying into a group, and you were a private homeowner or well, small apartment could take it. So that's something to think about. We won't be able to give our members any of the 30%. But the other side of this is very important, that we can develop apparently affinity groups. And I'm going to ask the experts whether an affinity group is our Hudson Valley Presbytery that would say that this group represents an affinity group that could get the benefits of the NYSERDA credits and reductions. Finally, I just wanted to point out that we've been talking about net metering, which says that you buy electricity and that which you don't use and you generate goes back. That's what they mean by net. But there's also time of day metering. And if you're in a location that allows for time of day metering, it's a way to leverage solar, because usually you're producing power at the peak period during the week, which costs a lot more. So you get better credits, and then you can use those credits, as Kathy pointed out, to you get buy power back from the electric company. So these are two dimensions you're going to hear a lot about: net metering and time of day metering. And there's a lot to it.
Okay, now I see your hand. I thought I saw another hand back here before. I'm coming to you.
First off, I'd just like to say that if Dutchess County is the Wild West, Sullivan County is the Garden of Eden, but then we knew that already. But secondly, I am among the solar illiterati. So what space is required for this sort of installation? Do you have any indoor storage space that's required?
I actually dragged this panel down. And so, I'm not at all an expert, but I did drag this panel down in my car, and I would like to explain the technology, because it really is demystifying. This is kind of important. This is really a large computer chip, is really what this is, isn't it? I mean, and so this, as you can see, sits on the roof on brackets, and the real technology that comes out of this thing, this panel produces DC current, direct current, right? Well, I think these are pretty new, aren't they? This is pretty neat. In our installation, we're planning on every panel having one of these converters. And this takes DC current, and right out of it comes AC current. And runs right through the meter, the reverse meter, right into the grid as alternating current. There are some installations that will run all DC current from all the panels into a larger converter, and then convert it into AC alternating current. All of these panels will be attached in a line of how many, Rich?
Well, there's 17 of these in a string, and it's just because of the amperage. This is an end-phase solution. They were the pioneers in this, and this is what really made solar take off. Nobody wants to have a lot of DC on the roof. I won't get into the details, but I will tell you it arcs. So the idea is that you sync with the meter. The meter is telling you what your supplier is doing. He makes these 60 cycles every second. And the microelectronics in there can mimic what the power company's doing in such a way that once it sends the power into that grid, nobody knows where that power came from. So it's the syncing with the grid which has started this thing off, and the ability to use AC in all the rest of your electrical equipment. So there's no real big adder of motor generator sets downstairs whirling or anything. It's just your normal hookup, and you're getting your power from the roof. And when the cloud goes by, nobody has to do a thing. The power output of this goes down. Central Hudson, our supplier, senses, their grid senses it, so they send more in. And it's a balancing act. It's a continuous balancing act.
I'd just say all of our equipment is either on the roof or they added 3 inverters, thank you. 3 inverters on the outside of our building. associated to where our electric panels are. So I think they look pretty nice, but you know, you got three big looking meters on the outside of your building. There's nothing inside, although again, Solar City and Tesla just announced that they can come up with a battery storage. I'm hoping to get one in my house because we've withstood putting in any natural gas fired backup generator, and hopefully if they could come up with a battery, then if Superstorm Sandy hits again, I won't go without power for 7 days. So, you know, that would be good. And Solar City actually said, geez, you just installed a little bit too quickly, because had you waited another month, we could have added a battery into your basement. And then the church would have had a nice backup, and that would have been nice too, because Superstorm Sandy really was sucky for the church too. So, you know, we lost it for like 14 days of the church. So it would have been nice to have the battery backup, but I don't know how much that will take up. They say it's about, I don't know, the size of a big 200 amp box or something in your basement. So.
How big is that?
Oh.
Smaller than a refrigerator.
Just a quick question. I guess, I don't know if Gary or Rich, you guys, when do you speak about solar thermal?
Not me.
Solar hot water?
I
don't know, just the roof.
I started with solar hot water way back in the 70s. Who was it, Jimmy Carter or somebody? And, well, here's a technology problem. We're good, except leaks are always a problem. I now have solar hot water on the roof. I got the old flat panels, and you run water through a serpentine. The panel gets heated by the sun, the serpentine. The water goes down to your hot water in the cellar. Works fine, but generally it's leak prone and it's maintenance intensive. Newer ones are tubes, which actually boil Freon and take it to a manifold. And they're very good, very, very good. So if you use a lot of hot water, and some places use more than others, say laundries and the like, a lot of them are going to this sort of thing. Household, I'd say it's marginal. It's more marginal than this.
I'm going to take, if this is a quick question, one more after this, and then we're going to break it. You could be a long question. Go for it.
Jeff Gary, White Plains Presbyterian Church. Just following up the water question, one of the things we're considering is putting heat pumps on the roof to do heating and air conditioning, converting it away from our oil usage and then doing it by solar. Question I have, we've been talking about solar on our roofs and solar for the utility of the church. There are other uses of solar. I'm curious if there's any wisdom or experience on the panel for things like solar lighting in the parking lot and stuff like that, and whether there would be any incentives for us to put something like that in.
So there's a lot of development in new technologies like that, but if you consider it, for instance, with solar lighting, that means that you also need a battery. So the costs for that are really high. It's not something, I think, that makes sense where you can currently connect to the grid, unless it were for emergency purposes, if the grid were down. You see in some cases highway lighting, you might see the solar panels and there's a battery there, and that makes sense because they're not connected to the grid. But where you have easy access to the grid, it's probably too expensive to make sense at this point.
In regards to the shared solar community, we have a local group that's looking to put in a 30-acre solar farm. And how far would you be able to share that power? Do you think that their congregants or whoever donated to that system wherever, could they get it?
So I know from a regulatory perspective, you have to be in the same utility service territory. But it also depends on how each project is structured. There's a tremendous amount of latitude that New York State has provided for those shared solar projects to be developed in different ways. So you have an entity who's the developer, who is putting in the system, and they can define who's able to become a member in that project. So if the congregation were part of the project, or if the congregation were engaged with the developer, or if the congregation wanted to become the developer, there are lots of different ways to consider structuring a project.
Say you're up in Orange County, could they credit somebody down in New York City, or?
No, because it's a different utility
But if the developer is structuring this thing.
Yeah, it has to be the same utility.
I would just add, any of these companies that, if you've got them installed on your home, they recruit you to become a recruiter for them as well, and offer incentives for the people who sign up under yours, and offer both you an incentive and them an incentive. So for the church, if anybody wanted to sign up with Solar City, our church would get some of that credit. But we've not extended that really to the congregants, because I personally don't like Solar City's customer contract when it's individual. So for on my house, I didn't choose Solar City. So I would not feel right recommending it to our congregants. I think their termination fees are ridiculous. And so unless you were going to pay it outright like the church did, I wouldn't recommend their Solar City lease. But, you know, again, I think the problem becomes finding somebody who will both do commercial and residential and offer you that kind of an incentive program.
Did you say 30 acres?
30 acres.
That's like 15,000 pounds.
Yeah. That's a long story.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard
30 acres is amazing, and it is on top of Shalom Mountain, and they're looking to clear cut 30 acres, and don't have any environmental controls.
Everyone, we're going to break for dinner now, at which point, yes, first let's give thanks to